Hello there Reason users, PoohBear here and welcome to my channel, and today I'm just going to have a quick chat about Reason measures and the PPQ timing. The maximum number of measures you can actually have inside of Reason is 34,952.53 measures. So how do we get to that number? Well, you have to understand we're in the computer world, so we have to store the information inside a data type, and they've actually used a data type called a signed 32-bit integer, which gives you just over -2 billion to plus 2 billion. So it's quite a nice large number. The other piece of the puzzle we need to know is something called the PPQ, which is pulses per quarter note. Sometimes it's written down as PPQN as well. And that's all to do with timing. And the PPQ inside of Reason is 15,360, which is absolutely incredibly, ridiculously high PPQ. The higher the PPQ, the better. It's a bit like high definition TV. You might have a 30-inch TV, it might show 720, or it might show 1080, 4K, 8K, so the higher you go, the better it is. But it can get ridiculous, because if you've got a small screen like a 10-inch and you've got a 4K picture on it, is it really worth it? But hey, that's another story. So this is per quarter note, so what we've got to do with this is just times it up by 4. So now we're going to get 61,440 ticks. They call it ticks. Just like we have our screen of 30-inch, we'll have pixels. We have this as ticks, so it breaks down as ticks, each of the number. So now we've got 61,440 ticks per measure. We can just divide that by our original number, and we get our 34,952 measures. And that's it. Quite nice and straightforward. Once we've got our measures, we know our BPMs, we can obviously work it backwards, and we can have a recording time of 19 hours, 25 minutes and 5 seconds. Quite straightforward. Now, I know a lot of this information because going back a few years, I was doing them big in C projects, and I decided I wanted to do a 24-hour in C project, and obviously I was hitting on issues, and it was just bombing out, and I wasn't too sure, was it bombing out because of my system, because it was so long, blah. So hence obviously I got some information back from Dev about it, so that's how I know about this. One thing I will point out is if you try and load up a MIDI file, which is actually larger, so it won't actually fit in, it will actually give you an error. It will say the file is corrupt, whereas the file is not corrupt. So that's an issue which really Reason Studios need to go and sort out. And I even proved it because I was writing my own MIDI. I can write my own MIDI files, raw MIDI files, and I could go right up to the final measure, and it would load perfectly. And if I went just one tick over, remember I said there's 61,440 ticks per measure, just one tick over, it came back that the file was corrupt. But hey, there we go. So the PPQ, or the PPQN, most people write it down as PPQ, but you can see this all over the place, and it is pulses per quarter note. As I said, Reason has a ridiculously high PPQ. To give you a silly, and I am being a bit silly here, but as a silly demonstration, if I had a 4 on the floor kick going, say, and I had a 16th hi-hat, and I might have a arp going on 8ths, and if I was to write down my bass and my melody and make sure they hit on 16th notes only, I could theoretically produce a MIDI file with a PPQ of 4, and I'm covered. So you can start to see how ridiculously high this is. If we drop down actually into the sequencer itself, and I'm sorry, I know this is very small to see, but I had to make it this small because I wanted to fit on all 240 points. So this is what they're referring to, their ticks, and we're going to reference the manual in a minute, because I have a little issue with some of their terminology, only because I got my technical head on more than anything else, so it's my fault more than anything else. I'm being pedantic. I will admit I'm being pedantic. So this is a 16th note, and we've got 240 ticks, what they call their 240 ticks in their 16th note, which is true. They do have 240 ticks per 16th note when they're talking about their PPQ of 960, because they do refer to, when you're in the sequencer, you're using the PPQ of 960, but the underlying engine really is 15,360, and they use another term called subticks, which don't exist. It's a bit like I said in my screen, my pixels, you don't get subpixels, you have pixels. So in between each of these little tiny ones, and I can zoom in, he says, in between each of these little markers here, you've actually got 16 real ticks. They refer to it as sub-ticks, but they're the real ticks. And I understand why they're doing it the way they're doing it, because if not, this particular area we're looking at would have to be 3,840 markers. And we've got 240, and we're already in the ridiculous here, because obviously, it'd be this point here. We'd be sitting at 128th of a note. So here would be 256th of a note, and then 512th of a note around about here. So we are in the ridiculously small area. So I am being a little bit more pedantic. But let me just go and grab the manual, as he says, as one does. Now, this is actually in a couple of places of the manual. They don't talk about the maximum measures, and that's how I got onto the manual. Oh, by the way, the reason I got into this is because someone actually asked a question on the forum about it, and so I provided the information about the measures, and I thought, I'm going to have a quick look up in the manual and see if there's actually any other information in the manual which would be useful. And the answer is no. If anything, I came across a number of these, they talk about it, and I found there's a bit of confusion, because obviously they talk about when we're editing and automation events in the sequence, you have a resolution, and it tells us here it's 960, which is 240 ticks per 16th note. And it's true, it's very, very accurate. As I gave you a demonstration, I could have a PPQ of 4. Old MIDI files around about 96. Having 480 PPQ, yeah, you've got really good control. So 960 gives us brilliant control. And then jumping from 916 to 15,000 that's why I refer to that as being really, really ridiculous. But that's what they've decided to do. And they probably went for something really, really high when they were designing Reason back then. It's because they were doing a lot of stuff with the automation. They was doing a lot of forward thinking. They probably didn't know where they was quite going, so they gave themselves a real nice big buffer. Fine, not a problem. But I do have a problem with the way they're referencing the word PPQ and the word ticks, because this is a true statement. There are 240 ticks per 16th note. But yeah, when we start getting into the sequencer, really when we're on our second 16th note, we're not back on 0 ticks. We are actually, if we're in this particular resolution, we'd be on tick number 480, just the way it works. Or if we're in the real resolution, it'd be 7,680 ticks. That's what the number would be at. So that's why I kind of have a little bit of a burden. It talks about when you're recording, the internal resolution is obviously that lot higher, which also is a little bit weird. They talk about a so-called, and they call it a so-called, which is true because there's no such thing as a sub-tick, but they call it a so-called sub-tick. So again, I don't have an issue with that. But we can actually get to the sub-ticks. We can actually draw on the sequencer, and we can get into the sub-ticks, which is a little bit of confusion, especially when we go to another part of the manual, which does talk about it as well. Virtually the same things. And, I'm being pedantic, and I've just been a bit of a bugbear. So I was going to come back over here. I was going to switch into here. And in fact, let's zoom in here. And I was going to get myself a pencil tool, and I'm just going to draw a note in here. Let's go back to here. And at the moment, because there's a little asterisk, that's telling me I'm actually on one of these so-called subticks. So 16 ticks between each of their markers. And obviously, as I go down, we're going down. I can get rid of the asterisk, and as I move this up, so you can see I'm moving it, and then we're off. But the fact is, it's saying, well, we're limited. If you're here drawing it in, or you're up here, you are limited to your 240. But obviously, here we're not. Is this classified as recording? I think of recordings when we hit the record button and we actually go off and do things. There's another bit in the manual as well, which is just again me being pedantic, which refers to we can obviously come along here, and if you actually control, I think it's the command on the Mac, and click that, it will actually snap it. And it says in the manual it would snap it to the nearest tick, which isn't true. It actually rounds it down to the nearest tick. Let's be honest. Even if this here was like 15 ticks out, it would not bother me, even because we're at such a low resolution. So being at even this resolution, it's sort of going down. It doesn't bother me. It's just the fact that the manual's saying it's doing one thing, and actually it's doing something else. There's no big wonderful conclusion to this video apart from you have learnt that you're limited to 34,953 measures. The PPQ is 15360. They like to talk about 960. They more talk about 960 so they can break it down into their measures, quarter notes, 16th notes, and they can go down to 240 ticks here and down here. But we've learnt we can actually place it wherever you want. Also, the manual states it when we click on like some of the quantizing stuff over here on the asterisks, that we're going to go to our closest tick, which is not quite true. It's going to round down to our closest tick, but hey, who cares? We're at this kind of resolution. It really makes no difference anyway. So that's just left me to say thank you for watching, and bye for now.